didn't see anything saying it's recording, but
No, there should be an announcement too.
okay, we got a signal. Good, thanks.
Why don't we say recording started?
Yeah, usually it says recording in progress.
And they give the people an option to jump out if they don't want.
Natalie, you're up.
Oh, thank you, Doug. Welcome everyone to our International Women's Day Lunch and Learn. We don't have a theme about Women's Day today. We weren't that prescient or organized to do that, but we do have our board president, Farah Jamil, who is going to be talking about neurodiversity and ADHD and interfaith. Farah is an Ivy League educated health executive and a certified leadership executive coach, where she has combined her love of science and business to work in several sectors, including government, health region, non-profit, and academia in Canada and the United States. She recognized the need to bring down barriers and build bridges within the realm of interfaith dialogue. As a woman of color and a visible religious minority, she has also volunteered for several interfaith boards, committees, and organizations, including the American Muslim Health Professionals and Commonwealth Alberta, which those of you Christians on the Zoom are aware of, and the Christian and that. Sorry, I flipped the page. This is our annual report that I'm reading from, totally unprepared, as usual. As a proud member of the Interfaith Center, she's committed to help create a society which respects the richness of human diversity, which is exactly what we are all about. Thank you. And now God will do a land acknowledgement.
Thank you very much, Netta. And yes, I'd like to acknowledge that we are indeed on treaty 6 land. And so what does that mean actually? Because the indigenous people were here for thousands of years before anybody else. And when they noticed that there was surveyors and settlers coming on the land and taking over, it reduced their ability to roam around the whole area, and they got worried. And also the buffalo got killed, so they're getting hungry. And the settlers were bringing in diseases, which made them sick. And so they appealed to the Dominion of Canada and negotiated with the Governor General, representing the Queen, to get something in compensation. And they got small parcels of land, and they got some money and some food and some farm equipment and medical supplies. That was all in the agreement that they would receive in exchange for ceding all the land that they've been free to roam in all these years. And so that's what we're left with. They still were disadvantaged tremendously in that negotiation and in that contract, the Treaty 3-6. And so we're still dealing with the aftermath of that. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission addressed it quite thoroughly. We're making a little bit of progress to rectify wrongs. And we've got a federal government law in place now, Bill C-15, says we have to examine all the laws in Canada and find whether there's prejudice against Indigenous people and fix those laws. So we still got a long ways to go, but we want to recognize that we're on land that was traditionally free land for all the Indigenous people, and it's no longer that, and it's Treaty 6.
Thank you, guys.
How do I share?
Farah, please.
Hi. How do I share this now?
Take it away.
I will take it away. Okay, sure.
Thing with camera.
So this is, I'm not sure what the Zoom is. There we go. Zoom is here. Hello, everyone. So sorry. We're having a bit of technical difficulties. Just trying to pull up. I did this pretty PowerPoint, or I attempted to do a pretty PowerPoint, just so that I could have an orderly way of going through this big topic. Neurodiversity is something that we're hearing a little bit more about, but at the same time, a lot of us don't really understand what it is. And then when you bring along the faith lens with it, along with the neurodiversity lens, that can get even more complicated. So this is my attempt to try to bring these two areas together. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of research, and I'm hoping to change that. One of the things that I've done is I founded a group.
Recording in progress.
Oh, the recording has started.
Let's make this one. Okay, so I think it looks. Getting an echo on my end.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yes.
Same reason.
Okay, I'll try too, just to see if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Gail, good.
Okay, so something's changed in your speaker because it wasn't working.
Sound, does sound better.
I think it's because they have the laptop on as well now. Because I think there's two guide bloods.
Okay,
At one point, we did see your PowerPoint, Farah.
You did.
Yeah, earlier on, we saw it and then it went away. So whatever you did before did work, but I'm not sure it seemed to work from your end. Yeah, there.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, okay, yay, woohoo, I knew we'd figure this out.
Sight and sound.
I
Woohoo.
just have to, the view part, I just have to figure out, but slide only, how about this?
Play,
Play,
just to your right at the top, way over.
see on my screen, it looks,
No,
it's,
yeah, but see up, now go left, all the way over left. where it says
okay,
Play,
okay, see, on my screen, it's covered. So I'm going blind,
oh, really?
yeah. How's that?
There we
Can everybody see that?
That's
Yay.
perfect.
All right, okay, so let's get. See, we figured it out. I knew we would. All right.
Yeah.
The
Ooh,
real theme of International Women's Day is teamwork.
teamwork, yes. Now, I don't know why the slides are looking so dark on this one. So, okay, so some of the some of the stuff is covered here, but that's okay. I'll work with it. So again, my name is Farah Jamil. I'm very happy to be here with all of you to discuss neurodiversity, ADHD, and interfaith. And if you don't know what ADHD or neurodiversity are, don't worry. That'll be part of what I'm going to present on. So some of the words here are covered, but basically the goal I'm hoping for is that we'll increase awareness of neurodiversity and ADHD. And I'd really love to hear how can we better navigate neurodiversity and ADHD in faith spaces together? Because I'd love to hear from all of you. So let's start with a very quick story. So as Netta said, she talked about my bio here, very nice. And, you know, these are some very cool things I've been able to do in my life, which I've been very thankful for. And then as an adult, I suddenly discovered I have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And this was a big shock to me. On one hand, it made sense because of some of the things or some of the ways that ADHD presents, procrastination, time management issues. My brain is always on, it's always busy. And I thought everyone's brains were like that. Having difficulty doing my daily prayers. As a practicing Muslim woman, this is devastating, where I'm trying to do my 5 daily prayers and I have such a struggle getting to the prayer mat. And I couldn't figure out why, because it's something I wanted to do. I just have such a hard time doing it. And so this was a discovery, okay, I have ADHD, so now what do I do? Well, I first went to a psychologist and the psychologist like, no, you don't have ADHD, you're too successful. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you're an Ivy League graduate, you have a full-time job, you have loving family and friends, and you're very charming. There's no way you have ADHD. And so I said, what do any of those things have to do with whether someone has ADHD or not? There's something called the DSM-5 manual. That's a diagnostic and statistical manual that is used by clinicians, including psychiatrists and psychologists, to see the criteria of any kind of health conditions and mental health conditions. So I asked him, let's take down that DSM-5 manual together and go through it. He said, okay, we went through it. He said, oh my goodness, you have ADHD. I said, yes, I know. And he said, but I'm so sorry, I have no training in it, I can't help you. I said, okay, let me go to a psychiatrist. So I went to a psychiatrist. He said to me, you expect too much out of life. I don't think you have ADHD. And by the way, by this time I had been tested, it was confirmed, but he was not convinced for whatever reason. He said, no, I just think you have too high expectations. Can you imagine someone saying to you that, oh, you just want too much out of life, you just need to lower your standards? As people of faith, we understand that there's more to this world than meets the eye. So to be told that you have too high expectations was unacceptable to me. So then I started trying to talk to other people within my faith group and other faith groups about this. And this is what they would say to me: you need to try harder. I would tell them I'm struggling with doing my prayers. I'm having a hard time getting to places, getting to meetings, getting to, the congregation, all these things. And they would look at me the same way that the psychologists and psychiatrists looked at me and simply said, what's the matter? You just need to try harder. Well, this was very hard. This was very discouraging. But one of the great things about being an ADHDer is that we have resilience. We don't give up very easily. So we have the challenges of lack of support. We have the challenges of not being believed. And we even have the challenges of judgment. But again, as people of faith, many of us recognize that there's only one judge, our creator, whoever that may be for you. But typically, I'm not concerned about other people's judgment. I'm concerned about how I can be my best self, and I'm looking to others for help and support. I have had a hard time finding that. But I think it's because for many people, they don't even know what is neurodiversity, what is ADHD. So from the very clinical sense, neurodiversity is a wide range of brain differences, and this is naturally occurring in the human population. This is something that is all over the world, from every background, every socioeconomic status, every faith background, doesn't matter. If you're human, you could have some form of neurodiversity. So this results from varied cognitive, social, and behavioral traits. So that's kind of getting a bit more clinical, but let me talk more about some of the examples of neurodiversity. So I think for many of us, we're starting to hear more about autism. There's autism spectrum disorder. So for many, this involves difficulties with social interaction and communication. Brilliant, they have brilliant brains, but sometimes the communication is difficult. And again, it's a spectrum. So when I'm talking about neurodiversity, I want you to remember that when you meet one person who's neurodiverse, you've met one person who's neurodiverse, because we all present differently. So I have ADHD, and if you know someone else who has it, we're going to be different, but we have the same things that are challenging for us, but in different ways. So ADHD is one. Learning disabilities such as dyslexia. This is also a form of neurodiversity. And for today, we're going to be focusing on ADHD. But if you're looking for more sources, Harvard Medical School, I have a link here that you can check out that has a bit more information about this. So what is ADHD and what is it not? This is something that was very important for me to convey, because we can't help something or someone unless we have a better understanding of what it is. So ADHD, it's clinically defined as people who may have challenges with attention, with hyperactivity or impulsivity. For me, I have a combination. So my brain is hyperactive. I don't think I was diagnosed until I was an adult because I wasn't bouncing off the walls. But my brain is always bouncing in my head constantly, for better or for worse. I say it's like if you see a swan and you see them and they look very serene and calm on the outside. But if you look beneath the surface, their fins are like this. That is my brain. I may look calm on the outside, but my brain is going a million miles a minute every minute, or that's how it feels like to me. And the brain is wired differently. I like the way the synaptic nerves work. There's just a difference in how it's wired. And we don't have as much dopamine or epinephrine in our brains compared to those who don't have neurodiversity. So what this means is it affects focus, thinking, and attention. It's hard for me to get to the prayer mat because it's harder for me to focus and get to the prayer mat. For me, my brain thinks, oh, there are so many steps. This is too hard. Just don't do it. You're too tired now. It's mentally exhausting and physically exhausting to do certain things at times because we don't have as much dopamine and epinephrine in our brains. So that's the neurochemistry behind it. And the executive function is also impacted. So that's part of the prefrontal cortex in the brain. So at the front of our brains is where you have the executive function. So think of this as an executive assistant. When you have a great executive assistant, they have all your files organized. They bring you your cup of coffee or tea at the exact right temperature at the right time to get you going. They make sure that you get to your meetings on time, that you have enough time to get to the meetings and you have the right files. And that when you get back from your meeting, when you need focus time, nobody disturbs you, no one barges into your office because they will say, so sorry, they're not available, come back later. For the ADHD person, this is our executive assistant. The files are a mess. When we do get coffee or tea, it's either ice cold or it's not even a coffee or tea. It's probably like a Coke or Pepsi or something. It's not even like the right thing. And when we're supposed to be getting to somewhere, getting to a meeting, they're like, oh yeah, I guess you sort of need this file, don't you? And you're running out the door like a chicken with its head cut off because you're trying to figure out, wait a minute, am I going in the right direction? Where am I supposed to be going? And the executive assistant's like, oh, you'll figure it out. Don't worry, just go. And then when you get back from your meeting, you need time to focus. They'll just let anyone into your office. Oh yeah, they're there, just go on right ahead. And you're like, no, I need focus time. This is what it's like for us. Our executive assistant is not working very well. So that's how I describe executive function. For us, this is impacted and it can be very debilitating. So this does impact our daily life, whether it's school, work, family, social situations. It is so debilitating because it is something that we deal with every day. And I'll talk to you more about that, about what that looks like. So what isn't ADHD? It is not a condition made up by the West. I can't tell you the number of times, especially being a woman of color myself, I can't tell you how people have said, oh, this is just a Canadian and an American thing. We don't see this anywhere else. The research shows that this is prevalent around the world. It's just about awareness. We're just getting more aware now from the evidence that this is something that impacts humanity. It does not only impact children. I was born with ADHD. This is how my brain was formed. It's just that I wasn't diagnosed until I was an adult. There are some people who do get that diagnosis as children and some of us who don't, but it doesn't just impact children. You don't grow out of it. It's something where you have to learn how to provide that support to your brain. It is not based on laziness or lack of intelligence. Some of the most brilliant people who have ADHD, they were able to do things, but sometimes they would feel like they were lazy or they would feel like they weren't smart enough, but that wasn't the case. It's that they needed to support their brains to help them implement what they wanted to do or needed to do. So who are some famous ADHDers? These are leaders, innovators, scientists, Olympians, actors, and journalists. And I have a few examples here. It is highly suspected that Albert Einstein and Steve Jobs had ADHD or some type of neurodiversity. So just imagine a world where we didn't have the theory of relativity, where we don't have the iPhone. Right now, the technology that we're using, a lot of it has to do with people like Steve Jobs. We also know of Sir Richard Branson, who created Virgin Atlantic and his space program. He has been public about his ADHD. Dr. Ed Hallowell, who is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, he was diagnosed with ADHD when he was in medical school. Trevor Noah from The Daily Show, or formerly from The Daily Show, he has depression and ADHD. And when he got the correct diagnosis, it helped him with his ADHD and depression. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian, ADHD. Emma Watson, Hermione from Harry Potter, UN Goodwill Ambassador, and an Ivy League graduate like myself, ADHD. The list goes on and on. Now here's the thing, from the religious realm, I can't name any famous people because I don't know. Unfortunately, in our spaces, we don't talk about this. So I'm hoping that maybe the next time we talk about this, we can think of people within our own groups who we look up to and admire. And if they happen to have something like this, I would love to open that conversation, but that's something we can talk about some other time or a little later on today. Now, here's another big myth that everyone's a little ADHD. I've had people say to me, oh, but Farah, well, sometimes I'm a little late or sometimes I procrastinate. Saying that you're a little ADHD is like saying that you're a little bit pregnant. Either you are pregnant or you're not. So you could look like this, where you have a baby growing in you, or you could be like this, where you've just got bloating and it just looks like you might be pregnant. So if you have issues with attention or timeliness, that could also be related to something else. But ADHD is a specific diagnosis and it is debilitating on a daily basis. You either have it or you don't. There's no such thing as being a little ADHD. So I promised you to give you a few factors of what it could look like for some people if they have ADHD. They don't have to have all of these, but even one or two, if they're debilitating, it could be an indicator, but you'd have to check with your clinician. It's called fast minds. F, if you're forgetful. A, if you're achieving below potential in life. S, if you feel like you're stuck in a rut. T, if you're time challenged, always trying to get to that place, whether it's for social reasons, meeting reasons, whatever the case may be, you're always late. That's the fast part. Minds, M, you feel like you're motivationally challenged. You know you want to do something, you just can't seem to get yourself going. Impulsive, you know, sometimes to get that dopamine hit, you'll impulsively do some shopping, or maybe you'll have some addictive behaviors, things that will help your brain feel better because you're lacking that dopamine, but they're not working for you, they're working against you. Novelty seeking, where you're constantly bored. You'll start one thing and then you'll start something else, and you know, then you get bored with that. On my computer, I typically have 40 tabs open at the same time because I get bored very easily. But now I know that in order for me to get things done, I have to do it one at a time, even though my brain is screaming at me, why don't we go do something else now? Because of that pesky executive assistant who's not cooperating with me. D is distractible and S is scattered. So for example, if you have a messy desk, now people will say, oh, well, that's a sign of great intelligence. Okay, no problem. If that messy desk works for you, no problem. But do you also have a messy car? Do you also have a messy house? Do you also have other messy things in your area that you just cannot seem to figure out how to clean it up? That could be an indicator right there. So this was developed by two psychiatrists, a Canadian psychiatrist and an American psychiatrist, who came up with Fast Minds and have written this book called Fast Minds, How to Thrive If You Have ADHD or Think You Might. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. You can get it from your local library. So based on this Fast Minds, who in your circle do you think may have ADHD after looking at these things? So I'll just put it back up here. So do you think you have it? Do you think a family member, a colleague, someone in your congregation? It's just something to think about. Maybe nobody, you're like, nope, none of this resonates with me. That's perfectly fine. You can still stay. I just want you to be aware. But think to yourself, who does this sound like to you? All right, and as I promised, this is evidence-based. I'm not bringing this up to you because I just thought, hey, this would be fun. I'm also bringing this to you because there's the evidence to support it. Oopsies. So it's not showing this little infographic that I had, but basically there have been over 100,000 pieces of evidence showing or talking about ADHD. It was first recognized, or at least one of the first records is from 1775, older than the US Constitution. We've got the neuroscans, we've got the brain scans to show that yes, this exists. So we need to stop thinking that, oh, maybe this is just a myth. It is not. We have got the science to prove it. So ADHD isn't an excuse, it's an explanation. It took me a while to reconcile this for myself because for a while I kept thinking it was an excuse. Why can't I do my daily prayers, or I can do it sometimes, I'm not trying hard enough. The evidence is clear. So I have a quick analogy here that I'm hoping to drive this point home, and it's about glasses. I wear contacts. We have a few people here wearing glasses. So I thought this would be a good analogy because this is what I had learned as I trained as an ADHD coach. And it really helped me a lot. So suppose if someone that you know, someone that you love had problems with their eyesight, and they tell you, no, I'm having a hard time seeing. Would you tell that person that all they have to do is try harder, be less lazy, and to stop making excuses? Would we ever say that to someone if they said to you, I can't quite see very well? Well, I'm hoping the answer is a big fat no, that we would never say that to someone. We would probably tell them, go to an ophthalmologist, go to an optometrist and get the right number for yourself so that you can see and get the support that you need, meaning glasses or contacts or even laser surgery. So everyone needs to find their correct prescription to get to as close to 20/20 vision as possible. It's the same with the ADHD brain. As I said, when you meet one person who's neurodiverse, you've met one. We each have our own number. Just like with our glasses, I cannot steal Sheikh's glasses and start seeing. No. And he can't take my contact lenses and start seeing. We both need the support for our eyes, but the support is going to look differently for each of us because we each have certain strengths and certain challenges. So when people try to say to me, oh, well, you know, it's not a real thing. This is what I try to explain. So what about ADHD and faith spaces? This is something that is not talked about a lot, but I thought, hey, let's give it a try. I found one thing so far. Now there's probably other things, but I thought this was very interesting. It's from the National Library of Medicine within the International Journal of Social Psychiatry, and it's quite recent, it's from last year. And the title is Religiosity as a Moderator of ADHD-related Antisocial Behavior and Emotional Distress among Secular, Religious, and Ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel. And they explore how religious individuals with ADHD fare in terms of, in terms of these psychosocial outcomes. They looked at 806 secular, religious, and ultra-Orthodox Jewish adults in Israel. And they looked at ADHD symptoms and treatment, emotional strengths and difficulties, religious belonging, religious behavior, and antisocial behavior. And what's fascinating is that they found that religiosity correlates with lower levels of ADHD symptoms and diagnosis. It directly relates to less antisocial behavior and less distress. And it moderates the negative effects of ADHD on antisocial behavior and distress. So just imagine that faith can be part of our structure to support our neurodiversity. Everyone's faith can be part of that tool to help us be our best selves. And the conclusion here is the implications include the importance of treating religious individuals with ADHD in a more nuanced manner, and of providing more information on ADHD to religious communities. I've included the link here if you want to see more about this. And I did try to see some other papers. Some of them are a little bit older. Some weren't didn't have a lot of information. So I found this one so far. But basically, it's at least a place that we can start this discussion. So what can we do within our faith spaces to help those who have neurodiversity challenges thrive? Not just survive, but thrive. So here are some tips. Now, again, this is just my own thinking, my own experiences. I have clients who have different faith backgrounds who come to me as a coach, and these are some of the things that we've talked about, but I've also looked at the literature when I've looked at ADHD in the workplace, ADHD in schools. And so I think there are some things that we can take from there to incorporate within our spaces. So one thing is, what are some small adjustments that we can each make within our congregations to accommodate any sensory needs? So for example, some of those who are neurodiverse might have sensitivity to sound. They may have trouble sitting still. So sitting in a pew or sitting on the floor for long periods of time may be very difficult for them. Is there some concession to help them with movement, to help calm their brains down, if that's the case for them? Using clear communication style. So sometimes you may have to avoid sarcasm or euphemisms or implied messages. Sometimes they need to be like, okay, what is it that you're trying to say? What information are you trying to convey? Now, I'm not saying you can't use humor and things like that. I'm just trying to bring the awareness that sometimes if you're giving a talk, they might not understand that you're being sarcastic. They might not understand that you're trying to make a point that's the opposite to what you're conveying verbally versus visually. So providing clear instructions and breaking down tasks. So taking complex things. If you're doing a Bible study, if you're doing anything where you're taking a very complex kind of information, how can you break it down so that it's not overwhelming? How can you make it really easy? And actually that's a sign of an excellent scholar when they're able to do that, right? Because we know that in humanity, we all have different levels. We need to make sure that we're helping all of ourselves. Inform about faith space etiquette. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard complaints at the mosque where, we've got our big events and you've got the kids running around and things like that. And people are like, can people still please control your children? Things like that. And I've heard this in other congregations too, from other faith backgrounds. Is everyone aware of the etiquette? So you're just making these judgments. You're saying that person's such a bad parent because they can't control their child. Well, has it been made clear? There is one mosque that I visited recently in Dallas, Texas. And they actually have a room, it's a quiet room for those who need quiet time or who are going to be a little bit noisier, but they are still able to observe the congregation and to hear the sermons. And I asked the imam, why is it that this is the first masjid that I've seen that has this? And he said it's because our previous imam had a child who's neurodiverse and asked if they could bring in this kind of space. And it grew from there. We have to be the best examples. If we want to show, if we want to lead, we have to show. And so because that imam took the time to explain to everyone the challenge of their child and said, if we could have maybe a room so that when they're feeling like, you know, very overly sensitive, or like the sensory overload, I should say, then they can still be part of the congregation because they can still see, but they're in a quiet space so that they're not disturbing anybody else. They were able to build that within the building and within the congregation. And now this congregation knows what is neurodiversity. And if someone looks a little bit different to them or acts a little different, they don't start judging. They say, how can we help? How can we embrace you so that you feel loved and that you feel like you are part of our community? It's an amazing thing. And try to give advance notice if plans change. For some who are neurodiverse, some can handle change really well, some cannot. They get really like upset, or they're just like, they're very routine based. So whenever you can, I know it's not always possible, but try to give advance notice and be kind, patient, and flexible. I know it can be frustrating when you're trying to do something and someone else is acting out in a different way. Have that patience and kindness as we are taught in each of our traditions. What doesn't help? Lack of appropriate infrastructure. So if you have someone who comes in the congregation and says, I need a little bit of support, they're not even willing to even talk about it. They're like, no, you should just be able to figure it out. Or, you know, this is not our problem. Do what you can. See if there's appropriate infrastructure and structure in place. Stigma doesn't help. Oh, you're just a bad parent. Or, oh, you're just lazy. Or you're just not trying hard enough. And that lack of awareness doesn't help as well. And don't assume someone is deliberately breaking the rules or being rude. Honestly, we don't want to cause waves. We don't want to be rude, but sometimes our brains just don't cooperate with our bodies. So don't assume the worst, assume the best, give the benefit of the doubt. And exclusion doesn't help. Please don't kick people out of your congregations because you just think it would be nicer if they weren't there. And it has happened. I think we've heard this. We've heard this in many places, and maybe it's not done on purpose, but when we are talking about inclusion, how can we be inclusive when we are excluding people? We need to do a better job of figuring out how can we help? How can we help and have each other grow within our faith? So a few resources. So I'm almost at the end here. I do have an ADHD symptoms checklist and a fast mind checklist that I'd be happy to share. So Netta, is that something that we can maybe email out to people if anyone's interested? I had created the ADHD symptoms checklist based on the DSM-5 manual. The manual itself is several pages for ADHD. I want to do it as a one pager because that's how my brain works. You can use this to assess children and adults. But again, it is just a checklist. I'm not a clinician. You need to take it to a clinician to start that conversation. If you think that it might be something that is present, you never know. And then the Fast Minds checklist, the book, if you don't have time to read the book, I created a checklist using the book, another one pager. And again, that could be a conversation starter. You can also take that to your health provider or talk about it with your family members and see if this is something that might be a factor. I had also, I'm the founder of Muslim ADHDers, and I actually hosted a Muslim ADHDers virtual summit last year. If you want to see the interviews, I interviewed 14 people, 7 Muslims, 7 non-Muslims from around the world to talk about ADHD, health and wellness, productivity, and faith, the intersectionality of it. And I had a chance to interview these experts to talk about this. What does this mean? What does this look like? And I had presenters who are from different age groups, different backgrounds, and it was a wonderful way to be inclusive and to kind of break down some of those stereotypes. So if you're interested, you can go to that link. And God willing, I'm also going to be hosting an Interfaith ADHDers virtual summit soon. I am dealing with some procrastination, but I'm on it. I do have some people who are helping me. If you know of anyone who would like to be one of my speakers that I would interview, someone who can talk about neurodiversity in their faith space, or something that they've seen, or something that they can offer as recommendations to other faith groups on how to, how can we do a better job of really balancing the obligations of our faith and the obligations of just being human, please send them my way, because I'm in the process of getting speakers for that. And that's all I have. So questions?
Stop share.
Oh, I can do a stop share. Yes, I'll do a stop share. But if I do have my information here, so I'm on Instagram and Twitter. This is my website. And if you want to contact me, there's a few emails, but you can use this one, farah@muslimadhders.com. This is my little logo. So you'll see that if you go on social media, and happy to chat anytime.
Wow.
Can I start by asking you, based on this presentation that I am thrilled with, can you accept a virtual hug?
A virtual hug?
Yes.
I will accept the virtual hug.
Good.
Yes, thank you.
Then,
Intentions.
Good. Do you want me to stop share?
Please.
Okay, yeah.
then I have a few questions, but I don't want to take the floor from everybody.
Okay.
So I'm going to start, but anyone wants to interject, please raise your hand. My first question is, what about Asperger's?
Yes.
Is it related to ADHD?
No, yeah, thank you. Great question, Sheikh. So Asperger's falls under ASD, autism spectrum disorder. It's part of the spectrum. And yes, you can have Asperger's and ADHD. So this is one of the things that I touched on, but I didn't really say a lot about. ADHD can often have comorbidities, meaning having an additional diagnosis of something else that goes kind of in partnership with the ADHD. So there are many people who have ADHD and depression, ADHD and anxiety, ADHD and OCD. You're gonna put my picture there?
Yeah, you're right there. Right there.
No, don't do that. They can see me there. No.
That's better.
That's bad.
No, let's not.
I like it.
No, let's not. I'd
She's
rather not.
She's not comfortable. with it,
No.
that's fine.
I prefer this. Thank you. So there are those who have obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, as well as ADHD. So yes, there are people who can have Asperger's as part of the autism spectrum disorder, where maybe some of the social, there may be some social challenges there. They still have that brilliant brain. And they can also have the ADHD, where they also have the challenges with like procrastination, motivation, etc.
Okay, next thing. Can we have a cure, or is it only education? You have talked about professionals that you have met and never recognized your issue.
Mhm.
But where are we heading?
Great question. So there's no cure of which I'm aware. However, because we are getting more research and better awareness, we are recognizing that there's what's called like multimodal treatments.
Okay.
So for some people, medications can help a great deal. I tried medications, unfortunately, they didn't work for me. So you'll probably often hear of Adderall or Ritalin. Right? That's probably a big one to help with focus. That's the intent. So for someone who has ADHD and has a hard time focusing, a stimulant medication such as Ritalin or Adderall, depending on what the physician says might work, could be something that brings them to the same playing level field, not to be abused. So just like we have glasses to put us on the same level playing field of having the vision, the Adderall or the Ritalin or any other kind of prescription puts an ADHD or a neurodiverse person on the same playing level field so that they can focus, so that they can, get to places on time. It's helping with the dopamine and the epinephrine in their brain, because like I said, there's a lack of that for those of us who have ADHD or neurodiversity, for many of us. So a cure, I haven't heard of a cure yet, but medications are looked at. Also cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. So that's a form of therapy where you work with a therapist to think about, okay, when you start thinking you can't do something, when you start thinking that you don't have the motivation, let's look at it deeper. So what's the thinking, what's the behavior, and what's the action that you can take? So CBT is really about going a little deeper as to seeing if there's a way to train your brain that whenever you start thinking, oh, I can't do this. Oh, I just can't get to that prayer mat. Or, oh, this is too overwhelming. This is a big project. I can't do it. You start training your brain how to say, okay, wait a minute. Why am I thinking this way? What's one small step I can take in order to pivot? And what can I do to help my brain understand that it's okay? You can do this. So that's cognitive behavioral therapy. Then there's also, what else? There's cognitive behavioral. There's also eye rapid movement therapy. But basically, there's also coaching. So I'm an ADHD coach. I'm a trained ADHD coach. So for some people, they have all three. They have a psychiatrist to help with the medication. They have a psychologist or a therapist to help with the cognitive behavioral therapy or something along those lines. And then they have a coach like me who helps them develop the strategies to build that structures for their brain so that they can get things done.
And how is that related to the bipolar issue?
So bipolar is a separate issue, but you can have someone who has ADHD and bipolar,
Okay.
right? It could be one of those comorbidities.
Okay.
Absolutely, because it falls within the mental health realm. It falls within the brain chemistry. So you can have people who have ADHD and bipolar.
Okay, so that complicates things, but
It can.
It could happen.
It could happen.
Are there any more questions in this room or on the Zoom, please? Questions? Or,
I have some questions.
okay.
So you've spoken about if ADHD can be cured. So obviously there's a bias or a thought there that it's an abnormality. And you've spoken about how it can be modified. Do you have a definition of what a normal brain is?
Great question. What is a normal brain? So here's the thing. What we know is when you compare someone who doesn't have ADHD, who doesn't have that lack of dopamine and epinephrine, we have those scans, and who don't have any other conditions, such as, any other kind of neurodiverse conditions, such as, ASD, so autism or bipolar. So you have those scans of what would be considered, someone who's not neurodiverse to someone who has ADHD. Those brain scans clearly show that there's differences. But the good news is that our brains have what's called neuroplasticity. It doesn't matter how old or how young you are. When you better understand your brain, whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse, when you want to learn something new, you start building new neural pathways in your brain. The same thing for an ADHD person like myself. I mean, I'm learning and growing just like everybody. I'm learning more about my ADHD, so I'm building these new neural pathways to help support my brain and to make it so that I am being the best I can be. Am I going to falter? Of course, I'm human. We all do. But it's very clear from the brain scans, someone who doesn't have a lack of dopamine or epinephrine, who does not have any kind of neurodiverse condition, that their brain looks different. That is very clear.
And do we define that one is normal and one is abnormal? Maybe ADHD is normal and the rest is abnormal.
That could absolutely be true. I would, yes,
And
why
how do we
not?
judge that? By the preponderance of people that are one way or the other?
Well, now this is a very philosophical question that you're asking.
Yes.
It's a great question. I think all I could say is that we need to, from a faith perspective, I think we need to recognize that there are all kinds of people and we all have different gifts and different challenges. And the more we take the time to better understand each other, for me, I know that'll get me closer to God. Because for me, when I appreciate more of my brothers and sisters around the world and their differences, it makes me feel a closer connection. That's one thing. And I think because for me, I see God as the only judge. It also helps me to have that compassion. It also helps me to understand that I may feel like I'm normal and that everybody else is different. But is that really the point? For me, the point is, how can I be more inclusive? How can I better support myself so I can be the best that I can be? And how can I help others, whether within my own congregation or other congregations from the interfaith perspective, so that we can truly have that humanity and that brotherhood and sisterhood. So for me, I have ADHD, I admit that. And if someone else doesn't, to me, that doesn't matter. What can we do to help each other regardless?
I'd like to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
First of all, on the question of normalcy. A very famous psychiatrist, the name of Gabor Mate, wrote a book on that.
Mm-hmm.
And his book is titled The Myth of Normal.
Ah,
And so I recommend that for anybody that's thinking anybody else is normal, including themselves.
yes.
And the second point is your guidelines for how to deal with people who are ADHDers. All of them, the courtesy, the kindness, the lack of expulsion, all those things are great pointers for all of us in every group function we have. And so I really appreciate those observations.
And you know, I think it's interesting because you know how sometimes we're asked, how can we be people of faith when bad things happen in the world? And I think sometimes what we have to remember is you can only recognize really the good when you see the bad. You can only recognize the power of the sun when you also experience darkness. So really, ooh, we got some music. I don't know. I don't know. Here, I'll mute you. Yeah, that's my sound. I'm not sure. There's some lovely music coming, but I'm not sure. That's okay. I don't know if it's from here.
Maybe your laptop have ADHD.
Maybe the laptop has ADHD. Very possible. But yeah. So basically, I think that, and I think I sort of lost my train of thought, but that's okay because that's just how my brain is sometimes. But basically, I think what I see it as is whether there's normalcy, whatever definition that is. Yeah. Yeah.
But I can certainly share the questions through email. But Mrs. McLeod, I don't know your first name. I see you looking possibly interested. Anything from the McLeods?
Very interesting presentation.
Can you?
Yeah, I can hear. No, I can hear
Oh,
you.
you can? Okay.
Yeah.
It's I think a very interesting presentation. And I really like the comment that sometimes we judge people as if they're willingly having some of these challenges rather than just understanding that we're all created a little differently. For some people, on time and organized is easy. And for some people, it really is a type of disability. So it feels different to me, knowing that it's something that's, so if someone's not doing that out of disrespect for the group, that they really are doing their best. I think it's always important to remember people really are doing their best.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think we have to remember that in many aspects of our lives. Like, you know how sometimes, especially with social media, you see people that looks like they have perfect lives, right? Because they're only showing what they want to. And then someone will be like, why can't I be like that? Why can't I be the one who can bake all these goodies and go to work and always look perfect? And, you know, how do these people do it? Everyone has different strengths and everyone has different challenges. I think when we remember that God is compassionate and merciful, why aren't we compassionate and merciful with ourselves and with others? Right? I feel like as humans, we tend to be so much harder on ourselves when we have a loving creator who wants us to be successful and we're the ones who are actually stopping our own success or judging others and making them feel like they don't deserve to be successful because, hey, they expect too much out of life, apparently,
Mhm.
right?
Amen.
Yeah. Cecile, I think you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Farah. This has been very timely for me. I am supervising a candidate for ministry who has ADHD and learning disabilities. And I'm both mentor and a supervisor in a placement right now. And all the sort of difficulties that you name have been surfacing, time management being one of them. And when there's deadlines to be met, it's just created havoc in in her life and those who have to work with her. But I really think I recommended, that she take part today, but I'm sure she doesn't have time. But I'm thinking that she might really enjoy making a presentation at your virtual summit, because one of her learning goals is around how to teach the church a little bit more about ADHD and how to work with people with ADHD. So I
That's
really
great.
appreciate everything that you've said today.
Feel free to have her contact me, Cecile. I'd be happy to speak with her.
And thank you everyone very much. I'm sorry we have to cut this off today, but we.
Last comment, please. Last comment.
Yes.
I see the problem is not with people who has ADHD. The problem is with the people that have to deal with it.
Yes.
I would restate that in saying, let's see how we can all work together regardless. That's how I would say it.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Very true.
If you're the person who's.
Deal with it or blessed.
if you're
Or
the
blessed by
person-
it,
if you're the
yes, there are
person who's
strengths.
Never where they're supposed to be.
Yes.
You can't keep a job, you can't do anything efficiently. That's the problem with you.
Thank
not
you
just
so
the
much,
rest of the
everyone.
world.
I hope you found this helpful, and I will
Yeah.
send to Netta those checklists.
Yes.
And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me anytime.
No, I think we have to vacate the room, so let's just.
Take care,
go ahead.
everybody. Bye.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. I will have a